So we've learned a great deal about issues, learned a great deal about what's going on in Harrisburg and Washington, and now it's time to talk about activism. And we have an expert with us here. Our next guest to join us today is Ned Ryun. He's a grassroots expert and somebody who not only talks about it, he has done it, he has walked the walk. He is the founder of American Majority, an organization which trains people to go and do the work we need to do, the knocking on doors, the attending events, the going to rallies and farm shows and gun shows, the things we need to do to take our message person to person, door to door, block to block. As I said, he's not someone that only through his organization trained thousands to do it. He goes out into neighborhoods too as well. So to share his insights and expertise and our call to action, our next guest we welcome to the stage is Mr. Ned Ryun. Ned?
Thank you. Appreciate it. I asked Loman if I could show a brief 2-minute clip before I really got going. So are we ready with the clip? Perfect. Go for it.
Who is really running the U.S. government? Americans are rightly questioning what has happened to our country. How was the duly elected President of the United States targeted by the Department of Justice and the FBI? How did the FBI and Justice Department knowingly use a fabricated dossier to lie to a federal court to secure 4 warrants in an abuse of federal power? And why was no one at the FBI, the DOJ, the courts, any federal agency or department ever held accountable or suffer consequences for these illegal acts? The targeting of President Donald J. Trump confirmed that there are 2 competing forms of government operating in Washington, D.C.
The politics and the culture of Washington, D.C. are all antithetical to a healthy, functioning American republic.
We are living in a scenario right now where the people with power, they think they know more than the people that founded this country, and they think that their job is to impose their view on the rest of us.
I think that the 3 most dangerous words in Donald Trump's vocabulary that the establishment heard was drain the swamp.
It is time to drain the swamp in Washington, D.C.
I'm in favor and was and supported, and I'm a friend of Bobby Kennedy because he wants to break the back of the status quo in this town. As does Tulsi, as does Pete, as does Cash. And I'm telling you, this town is now as nervous as it's ever been.
Elon Musk, we didn't elect him, we didn't select him.
Our democracy has become synonymous with an embrace of the administrative state. Anything the administrative state is doing, anything that the deep state is doing, is identified by the left with our democracy. In fact, it is the enemy of our constitutional republic.
The political branches are not going to drain the swamp. Why the hell would the reptiles drain the swamp?
It was the great outsider of Trump who brought this administrative state into the light and to the surface. And now the American people have the opportunity to take their government back. So I hope that you guys will take the opportunity to watch that. It's free. I posted as the top post on my X handle, at Ned Ryun, N-E-D-R-Y-U-N. It's free. If you're not on X, which was formerly Twitter, you can go to AmericanLeviathan.com. It's about a 62-minute documentary about the reality of what's taking place in D.C. And I'm going to talk about activism. I'm going to talk about applied politics. I'm going to talk about our responsibilities for those of us sitting in the room. But I kind of want to lead in with why. Why is it so desperately important that we renew our efforts to actually engage in the political process, to continue to hold on to political power, and then for those that we have elected as our duly elected representatives, to actually use that political power that we've given them to do the right things. But we're at a singular moment in American history. I believe that we have a chance to undo this administrative state. I used American Leviathan as the title for my documentary and my book for a very specific reason. And people who are familiar with the Old Testament think it's about the sea monster, which is, of course, the first definition. The second definition is a massive, sprawling bureaucracy that tends to be totalitarian. We have our own Leviathan in this country. It is called the administrative state. It is a massive bureaucracy filled with unelected bureaucrats who think they govern, who think they decide. Has nothing to do with our Constitution, has nothing to do with representative government. In fact, at one point a few years ago, I was talking with President Trump, and I said, you know what your greatest sin was? in the eyes of permanent DC, this administrative state? You came into DC in January of 2017 and essentially declared, I'm the one who decides. I'm the duly elected president. I'm the one who decides a lot of domestic and foreign policy. And they said, no, we don't think so. We think we decide. I said, sir, to be honest, if you were to look back the last 50 to 100 years, they would be correct. Because we have two very competing different forms of government in this country. An administrative state, the massive bureaucracy, unelected bureaucrats who think they decide, at conflict with our constitutional republic, in which all power is to flow from the people to their duly elected representatives, who then make the stewards of the power and money given to them to actually form a government of, by, and for the people that every day is supposed to think about prioritizing and protecting and advancing the interests of the American people. So if you want to know all the craziness that's been happening in DC, really from the moment Trump came down that escalator, it boils down to one thing. And that includes Russian collusion, Ukrainian quid pro quo, political lawfare, all of these bogus things that have been done against Trump. It comes down to one thing. Who decides? And in a constitutional republic, it's supposed to be the duly elected representatives of the American people who are to decide and who are to govern. And so with the election of Trump this past November, I think we're in a singular moment in American history where we can actually end the administrative state and restore our republic and restore representative government in this country. I talked with him briefly a few weeks ago, and I said, you know, the thing that you were doing with Elon and Doge, I would hope that at some point you give a speech to really show people what you were attempting to do, and that is restore representative government to this country. That we're not going to have unelected bureaucrats squirreled away in some nameless, faceless bureaucracy actually dictating to the American people how they are to live their lives with no accountability. There is no recourse against many of these unelected bureaucrats. There's no recourse for redress of grievances by the American people when they decide that their statutes and regulations are going into effect. Many times there's no recourse for the American people to say, this is egregious. You can't do this to me. So at some point we have to break that power. And it's fascinating for me to watch Elon Musk and Doge. The process that it began, waste, fraud, and abuse. We're going to come in and we're going to do Doge for waste, fraud, and abuse, and we're going to trim this government, make it more efficient. I want to be very clear. The form of government that we have in DC today, the administrative state, I am not interested in it becoming more efficient. I'm interested in it being shattered into a million pieces. It's the only way we're going to win. It's the only way we're actually going to win, because the waste, fraud, and abuse is the poisonous fruit of a poisonous tree. And the poisonous tree is an administrative state founded on deeply unconstitutional and deeply un-American beliefs and philosophies. But it's interesting to see this epiphany that's taking place with Elon over the course of time. A few weeks ago, he was in the Oval Office, and he said, we have the rule of the bureaucrat. That's what we're experiencing. Again, we go from waste, fraud, and abuse to we have the rule of the bureaucrat. Well, that's what the progressives always intended with the founding of the administrative state at the turn of the 20th century. They wanted the bureaucrats to rule. They wanted them to govern. They wanted them separated out from any political accountability. A couple weeks after that, turns out as he's doing more and more revelations about what's taking place inside of our government, it's gone from waste, fraud, and abuse, rule of bureaucrat, to, I would argue, we're looking now at a slush fund money laundering operation of our government with our taxpayer dollars to fund leftist NGOs, friends and family, to actually promote anti-American things, to undermine this country and our taxpayers and insult to injury with our money. But that's what happens when you have unaccountable, unelected bureaucrats who think they decide, who think they govern, who think they're the ones who get to spend the money. So none of this is by chance. Again, I want to make it very clear, when he said rule of the bureaucrat and kind of insinuated that it was maybe a bug, it's a feature. If you were to ask me, rule of the bureaucrat, is this a flaw? Not according to progressives. The system is working beautifully. That's what they always envisioned, the rule of the bureaucrat. So when progressives founded the administrative state of the 20th century, they intended to have this massive bureaucracy with unelected bureaucrats, and the only separation of powers they actually believed in was separating out these bureaucrats from any political accountability. They didn't believe in the actual separation of powers. In fact, they thought that was a bug that should be corrected. They thought they should consolidate power of the legislative, executive, and judicial into the hands of these unelected bureaucrats to let them govern. They were deeply hostile to the founders. So the movement writ large, if you want to go and look back for the last 100 years, and this is the kind of the theme of my documentary, also book, is the progressive movement went out and set out to destroy the moral and political authority of our Constitution. Deeply hostile, deeply antagonistic to the original intent of our founders in the Constitution. So what are we going to do at this present moment? We now are confronting the reality of rule of the bureaucrat, massive bureaucracy, in fact, a bureaucracy that is so convinced they should decide that they thought it was the right thing to actually target Donald J. Trump, the duly elected president of the United States, with the DOJ and the FBI, not only during his 4 years in office, first 4 years in office, but afterwards as well. And the reason they did that is because they viewed him as an existential threat to their status quo and way of life. Because Donald Trump has figured out a few things over the last 8 or 9 years. And the first term might not have understood fully what he was up against. I can assure you, having had conversations, he is fully aware of what he's up against and what he intends to do. I hope he goes all the way. I hope that he really understands us firing. I think there are 216,000 federal employees right now with the DOJ effort. Until you get to 800,000 and then remove those from the federal roll so that they never come back, that's just the start. And then you shut down the Department of Education and you blow up the building and you build your garden of heroes over it. And then you go for HUD and you keep going. I need them to channel Woodrow Wilson. And some of you who know Woodrow Wilson is the founder, one of the founders of the administrative state, might find that ironic that they should channel Woodrow Wilson. A few years before he took the White House, he declared, "We are not bound to adhere to the doctrines held by the signers of the Declaration of Independence. We are as free as they were to make or unmake governments." And so our mentality back should be, we are not bound to adhere to progressive ideology or their doctrines. We are not bound to adhere to their administrative state. We are as free as they were to make or unmake governments. And we have to unmake the administrative state and restore a constitutional republic. But how do you do it? I've got 7 minutes. Now I'm getting to the activism part. Well, one is you. It's you having greater understanding and greater clarity as to what is actually going on in DC. That's why I wrote the book. That's why I did the documentary. Once the American people writ large wake up and realize the threat that administrative power is to their civil liberties, their freedom, their prosperity, their way of life, and understand that administrative power revives absolute power, once they realize that, and then get a hold of Congress and say, you actually have to legislate. Stop subdelegating your legislative authority to these unelected bureaucrats. The president, who has all the moral and political courage necessary, continue to support him. Actually have a little chat as much as possible with the Article 3 judges, who apparently right now seem to think they can overstep their bounds into the Article 2 branch and dictate to the executive what he can or can't do constitutionally. But when enough of the American people wake up and understand the threat that administrative power is to their way of life, it is the beginning of the end of administrative power. The second step is political power. I think sometimes we as conservatives and Republicans do not understand the basic principle of politics. Politics is policy. If you do not have political power, all you're doing is sitting around and having great conversations about great ideas that will never be implemented. I am fixated on the idea of us actually getting to the point where we are 24/7, 365 days a year, actually focused on achieving and maintaining and using political power. How do we do that, though? Well, first of all, we need to elect the right people that actually have moral and political courage. Donald Trump has it in spades. Afraid most of our members of Congress do not. I hope that Donald Trump will instill in them some sort of spine and backbone to get some of the things done necessary that the American people voted him in to do. He painted in bold and bright colors last year. Tariffs, deportations, DOJ, all of these things. There was no mistaking. Drill, baby, drill. And he won convincingly. And now we have a Congress that is apparently too fixated on proxy voting to actually vote on bills to rein in these out-of-control judges. We need Congress to actually step up to the plate. What do I mean by achieving and maintaining political power? Last year, American Majority Action, or C4, we went into Arizona, Nevada, Wisconsin, and North Carolina. And I pitched my donors at the beginning of January of 2023. And I said, if we focus on the fundamentals, I am convinced we can win these battleground states in 24. And guess what? If we maximize the Republican vote in these states, the rest of the business will be taken care of. So I pitched them on actually generating more absentee ballots among mid to low propensity voters. For example, in Arizona at the beginning of 2024, there were only about 15,000 more Republicans on the permanent absentee ballot list. By the time ballots dropped on October 9th, due to primarily American Majority Action, there were 80,000 more Republicans on the permanent absentee ballot list. So we'd better figure out how we build on the numbers that will lead to success. It's voter registration in a consistent long-term way. Do you know why Florida is no longer a battleground state? For 5 years, the Florida Republican Party decided year after year they were going to spend $1 million or $2 million on voter registration. They were going to invest in generating more absentee ballots among mid to low propensity voters. They were going to force county clerks to actually clean their voter rolls. And then when it came time for the ballots, when they dropped the ballot chase, they were going to invest 10 to 12 million at a minimum to chase in 1.1 to 1.3 million Republican ballots. That's how Republicans won in a state until recently was Democrat majority registration. Now, because of that work, there are now 1 million more Republicans registered in the state of Florida than there are Democrats. Florida is no longer a battleground state. But because they focused on the fundamentals and actually spent the time day in, day out, week after week, month after month, focused on the right things, it has dramatically changed the dynamic of Florida. We should be doing the same. We know where some of the key House races are going to be next year. We can identify the top 20 or 30 House districts. You know what we should be doing right now? And I'm actually pitching donors at this very moment on this plan. We should invest significant money into voter registration in those districts. We should invest into AB generation. We should go identify the Trump-only voters, because I can assure you this is something that really does worry me, the Trump-only voter dynamic. And again, one of my data guys and I were looking at Arizona. We haven't done a deep dive, but we think it's between 70 and 100,000 Trump-only voters in the state of Arizona. And my argument back is we better get a hold of them. We better get them on a permanent absentee ballot list, and we better communicate to them that if we do not keep the House in 26, Donald Trump's going to get impeached. There will be all sorts of investigations, and the agenda will go sideways. So your vote in 24 will be for naught if we don't keep the House in 26. And then in those same districts where we've been doing the voter registration and the absentee ballot generation, to actually fund absentee ballot and early vote projects, where you are going after the ballot universe of Republicans and getting no less than 80% of them in. There's something magical about 80% of ballot return for Republicans. If you get to that mark, typically you're going to win. If you fall below it, typically you're going to lose. And sometimes you get 78, 79 and win. Sometimes you get to 81 and lose. But the odds are if you get over 80%, you're going to win. This is what we actually have to be thinking about in 26 and in 28 and in 30. And the reason I say through 30, have you looked at the census? The census dynamics and reapportionment that comes in 2030, with all of the votes moving south into red states, the numbers will work in our favor. If we want to be successful in destroying and dismantling the administrative state, of holding on to and maintaining and using political power, we need to put our hands to the plow, our nose to the grindstone for the next few years. And we need to focus every day on voter registration and absentee ballot generation, and then focus on chasing those in. The last thing I'll say is this, as my time is up. We are confronting religious zealots. Progressives, their religion is politics. Their holy of holies is the administrative state. They think the state is salvation. Too many times on our side, we're careerists. We'd love to go to DC, have a lovely career, have a great time. 20 years later, we retire. I'm here to tell you, until we meet their religious zealotry with our own passion, we will lose, because careerists never beat religious zealots. So I would encourage you, find the passion within you. We have a country to save. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.